Thank you guys. That was great. Top of the mic. So as you can tell, Petey Dunn is not here this week with us. He's officiating a wedding. And so we asked Kevin Cox if he would fill in. So a little background on Kevin, for those of you guys who don't know him. Kevin grew up here at St. Andrews. He has deep family roots here. His not great-grandfather, but the great Paul Cox was a senior pastor here, his grandfather. Kevin is currently the junior high and college director at St. Peter's by the Sea, and on a path to seminary. And he is a husband, expecting father, 3 weeks, and he's here to preach the good news to us. So here's Kevin.
Bright light. Bright light on me. Like Ryan said, I grew up here. It's always good to be back. I think one of my favorite parts about being back here at St. Andrews, specifically down here in the Fellowship Hall, it just reminds me, we used to have youth group down here. We had what is now called Pipeline started down here. And I just have so many memories to growing up here. I started my ministry career here. And my first year of ministry, a buddy of mine, Tyler Nazarian, who was an intern with me at the time, he's Pastor Mark's son. We were kind of young. We were 19, waiting to help out wherever we could. We took over the junior high program for the guys, and we're really plugging in there. We went to winter camp, okay? And Tyler and I's first time at winter camp, we had been as a camper, but not as a counselor. So we were kind of excited, didn't really know what was going to happen. We thought we were really cool for some reason. I don't know why. We just thought, hey, we're counselors now. We get to go in early to things. And one of those things we got to go in early to was the evening gathering. It was our first night, Friday night. And Colleen's looking at me like, don't tell the story. So Tyler and I, new counselors, go into the evening gathering place, which is this huge hall, kind of like this one, tons of rows of chairs, and we have to save seats for our middle schoolers. So we're saving our seats, and we're kind of hanging out, thinking, pretty cool stuff, getting in early, even though that's not really cool. And then some female counselors come and stand behind us, and we're like, whew. You're a guy counselor, you're thinking, okay, not like you were thinking you're going to date them. We're just like, oh, this is nervous talking to another, girl counselor, right? So Tyler and I, look at each other, give each other, the nod, okay, we got to talk to them, right? So we turn around, we're like, hey, how's it going? Where are you from? Whatever. Like, oh, where are you from? We're like, oh, Redondo Beach. It's kind of in LA, 30 minutes south. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. And oh, where are you girls from? And they're like, oh, we're from Placentia. And Tyler goes, oh, placenta. And as soon as he does that, I look and I'm my mouth was like, I was like, what did you say to them? And it just got really quiet. And they're like, I guess we're all from there once. And they didn't talk to us the rest of the weekend. But it was a funny story that I get to tell all the time. At the expense of Tyler. Sorry, Tyler. So I have so many great memories coming here, and I'm super stoked to be back. Let's go ahead and open to Luke chapter 9. If you have your Bible. Okay. It's not your turn. That's okay. So Luke chapter 9, and we're going to start at verse 57 and go to 62. Just start off. I'll give you a second. Verse 57. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another, Jesus said, Follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, Leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Yet another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." Leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. How many of you guys hate it when people drag their feet in hallways or just in general, like walking? Like, it's pretty annoying, right? I have to apologize because I'm one of those people. Okay, I love to drag my feet. I love wearing rainbow sandals and just like scraping them along slowly behind people just to annoy them. Just kidding. Not to annoy them, but that's just how I walk. And I like doing that. I like it so much. Okay. Actually, in 7th grade, I didn't wear shoelaces. Okay. I wore these fat Span skater shoes and had no shoelaces on them, and I would just like flop around. Like I would just walk around and be like in the hallways at school. I don't know why I thought it was cool. It just was cool not to wear shoelaces. And so the tongue is like flapping out, right? So I drag my feet everywhere. And not only do I do that literally, I do that figuratively too. When I was growing up, my mom would always want to take me somewhere or tell me about something really awesome, and I'd be like, "No, Mom, that sucks. I'm not going." Right? Or someone would want to say, "Oh, this is really awesome. You got to go. You got to try this new place." I'd be like, "No, I'm not going." And then when I finally like dragging my feet all the way there, I'd be like, "Okay, this is awesome." Right? One time though, feet dragging got me in trouble. Okay, and in a literal sense, we were teeping my friend's house in 7th grade. And I had my aforementioned Vans with no shoelaces. Now, we thought we were really cool. We TP'd the house once. He was our friend. It wasn't ill-willed. Like, I knew him. He's my buddy. TP'd his house once. Awesome. We went back to where we were staying at, and we were like, that wasn't good enough. Like, let's go back again. TP'd again the second time. Left. We didn't get caught. We were like, that was too easy. Like, we need to, like, get some danger in there. So we go back a third time. Lo and behold, door swings open. My friend's dad comes like booking after us. And everyone else, like I could see them passing me, right? Like everyone else is, and I'm like, no, right? So I like jumped behind a bush. I eventually got caught. And it was not good. Not a good thing to do. And I learned my lesson. I wore shoelaces every single time after that. Now we still wear sandals, to be honest, but I wear shoelaces forever after 7th grade. I think, even though that's a silly story, I think it's a good demonstration of how sometimes we like to drag our feet when God calls us to do something. Okay? When Christ bids these men to follow him, they drag their feet. Both of these two followers, or would-be followers, they have seemingly valid reasons not to follow God. To say goodbye to loved ones, to bury one's own father who has died. That makes sense. I read this passage and I go, whoa, Jesus. That's a little extreme, right? Like those are perfectly reasonable things to do. If that happened to us now, we would have no hesitation to say, no, God, I'm going to bury my dad. He just died. I'm going to mourn. I'm going to go, say goodbye to my family. That's what you do. Okay? And it seems extreme, but I think the point to illustrate here in that story is following God isn't on our terms. When we get that call to follow Christ, it must not be impeded by distractions. I think a lot of times we're guilty of that. So those are two would-be followers. Let's go ahead and look at Mark chapter 2, verse 13 through 17 to look at some other guys. So Mark chapter 2, verse 13 through 17. He went out again beside the sea, and all the crowd was coming to him. and he was teaching them. This is Jesus. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as he reclined at the table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And the scribes and the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to the disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And then Jesus heard it, and he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, I come not to call the righteous, but sinners. I come not to call the righteous, but sinners." Okay? So in the story of Levi, also known as Matthew, the tax collector, he's called by Jesus and immediately reacts with obedience. He doesn't ask to finish counting his money or to say goodbye to his family. Levi hears the call of Christ and lets nothing stand in his way to follow him. We see this story time and again with the other disciples too. Peter and Andrew, earlier in Mark, they're the first call. They drop their nets, like right what they're doing. They drop their nets and they follow him. And every time you see an account of a disciple being called by Jesus in the Bible, one of the 12, you see that immediately they stop what they're doing and they follow God. I want to read to you this quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, really awesome theologian and writer. He was part of an assassination attempt on Hitler. I think that's what he's one of the things he's most known for. He wrote this book. It's called The Call to Discipleship. It's really rad. I highly recommend it. This is the quote I will read to you, and it's actually following what I just read in context of Mark chapter 2, verse 13 through 17. The call goes forth, and it is at once followed by the response of obedience. The response of the disciples is an act of obedience, not a confession of faith in Jesus. The response of the disciples is an act of obedience, not a confession in faith in Jesus. I think a lot of times we get caught up in having people say the right thing in church, and especially when it comes to, committing to follow Christ. We always want to hear, "Oh, did you, accept Jesus into your heart?" I think a more important question is, are you obeying the commands? Are you loving one another? Are you showing that love towards God? Are you obeying Christ's call in your life? The idea of obedience, simple obedience, is lost on us at times. Sometimes we make things way too complicated. We listen to our emotions, our doubt. We like to make excuses about our circumstances in our lives. I have a buddy of mine, and he was getting ready to go on a mission trip, okay, but he didn't end up going, as is at UCLA. And I'm talking to him about it, like, "Oh, why didn't you go?" And he said, "Well, I just kind of felt like my heart wasn't in it. I would have just been going out of obedience." Like, that's the point? Like, you should have gone out of obedience. Like, that's it right there. Another story, I think, stealing this illustration from Francis Chan. A lot of times, like, okay, say if you had a kid, and soon I will have a kid, I guess, and I'll have to deal with this, but if I say, what? I mean, yes. So you have your child, and when you say to your child, "Go clean your room," okay? You don't want your child to say, "Oh, I memorized what you just said." You say, "Clean your room." "Look, I repeated it to you. Clean your room, clean your room." Kevin, 4-5, clean your room. You don't want him to learn the Greek of clean your room. Okay? You want him or her to actually clean their room. Like, that's the point of a call, is to obey it. Discipleship, I think, comes from obedience, and obedience is hand in hand with discipleship. If you're a disciple of Christ, that means you obey his commands. That doesn't mean you come to church, you sit in the pews, we sing the songs, and then do nothing after we leave. Okay? Discipleship isn't hero worship in saying all the right things, but it's about obedience to the Son of God. I think sometimes when we talk about obedience, there's this little conflict between faith and works. And in the Christian church, there's always kind of this wrestle between what's more important, faith or works. But they're in the same. You have to have both together. You cannot have one without the other. Only he who believes is obedient, and only he who is obedient believes. And you can't separate that sentence out into two different things. They're both together. A lot of times Jesus tells parables, right, so that we understand. He gives us commandments, and a lot of his commandments are actually really simple, okay? But we like to complicate it. The ideas that Christ calls us to are simple. Have faith like a child. Have agape love or unconditional love for one another. Sometimes we make it hard on ourselves. We don't listen to that. We like to drag our feet. We like to say, no, I got this thing going on, God. I don't want to reach out to my neighbor who's hurting. No, I don't want to show up for homeless lunch because, I have to take time off work. Or, no, I don't want to obey that commandment. Yada, yada. Fill in the blank. Okay? You can come up with a million excuses to not obey God or his commandments. It's really easy to show up at church, okay? It's really easy to sing praise songs. It's really easy to be about things that are good, like social justice or something of that nature, feeding homeless, right? But if you don't have a heart of Christ in that, if you don't have the love of God for others in that, you're wasting your time. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love the wedding passage, but it's really about God's love for us. If you don't have that agape love, what you're doing is a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Word for word, 1 Corinthians 13. You have to have those commandments of Christ. You have to be obedient to them. Now, the things I listed before, church, singing, social justice, those are great things. But if that all ends inside of these walls, and we don't go out and live it, and we don't go out and live God's love, you're wasting your time. The gracious call of Christ becomes a stern command. Christ says, do this. Christ says, drop your nets. Christ says, give up that. He says, come to me. And in John chapter 14, verse 15, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments.
myself, I belong to you. Lead me to the cross. You were as I tempted and tried. You became flesh for my sin and death. Now you're risen. Everything I once held in, I count it all as lost. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Oh, lead me to the cross. Your heart, to your heart, your lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Oh, lead me to the cross. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Oh, lead me to the cross.
Father, lead us as we go. Help the words that we've heard this evening penetrate us, transform us. So that we're not just memorizing your commands, that we're not memorizing the call, but that we're actually going forth and performing it. Father, give us courage, give us confidence, give us wisdom and insight. Help us be effective for you, powerful for you. This world needs hope, it needs light, it needs your grace, your peace, and your salvation more importantly than anything else. Just thank you and praise you in Jesus' name.
Really quick, let's thank Kevin. We have the corner.